Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Passport to Wealth, the podcast that takes you on a journey through navigating your finances as a U.S. expat. I'm your host, Arielle Tucker, a certified financial planner and enrolled agent focusing on cross-border planning for U.S. expats. And I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Savannah Chafin, a CFP candidate, enrolled agent, and self-declared expat tax nerd, here to guide you through the maze of life and finances across borders and share the inspiring stories of fellow U.S. expats who have navigated the process.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Passport to Wealth. Today, I am joined with a very special guest, Katrina Nacci. Katrina is a U.S. CPA with over a decade of experience in cross-border accounting, specializing in gap conversion, IPO readiness, and M&O support between the U.S. and Europe. And when preparing for this interview, I noticed a pun Katrina made in a presentation she gave. And as a personal pun lover and tax nerd myself, I kind of think it must be shared. So she is passionate about bridging the gap between the US and European accounting standards. And for those out there who are not as big of tax nerds as us, GAP, or GAAP, is the acronym for US accounting standards US-based companies must follow. So I was personally amused, but I'm a huge tax nerd, so at least you got a laugh out of me.
Thanks for pointing that out. That's actually kind of my slogan or catchphrase or what have you.
Yeah, and among all of that, she's a fellow expat as well. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us where you are in the world, how you got there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Savannah. So I'm originally from the U.S., born and raised, spent the first 18 years of my life there, went to college there. But I started my career with PwC in Boston. I was there for 3 years, and I always just kind of wanted to live in Europe for a little while. I was fortunate enough that when I was younger, my parents did a couple of European trips with us in high school. My mom's a big adventure nerd. I think she's in the Maldives right now, actually. Sidebar. But anyway, so I was fortunate enough to have that experience and really just wanted to immerse myself in it further and decided, at some point I want to live in Europe. At the time with PwC, as kind of an senior associate, it was very hard to request to go on secondment abroad. You kind of had to wait until you were a senior manager. And I just didn't really want to wait that long because I didn't know where I was going to be in my life personally. And I was actually contacted by a recruiter who said, hey, we have this this job potential in Frankfurt for this biotech company. I didn't know anything about Germany. I didn't know any German at the time, but just decided, I'm going to apply, try it out, see if it works. So I ended up getting the job. It was for a joint German-U.S. listed company to do their U.S. reporting that they needed to do to be listed in the U.S. So they specifically wanted somebody that was from the U.S., and that's why they wanted to move me over. So I moved over to Frankfurt, Germany, initially in 2013. So I've been here for almost 12 years now. And I actually ended up going back to PwC as a local hire in Frankfurt, funny enough, because before I left Boston, one of the partners I worked with put me in touch with a partner in Germany, and he said, hey, if you ever need anything, reach out to this guy, he'll help you. So I actually did and ended up joining his team here in Frankfurt. And there was actually a specific U.S.-focused team that was helping European companies go public in the U.S. or work on accounting conversions across borders for acquisitions and things like that. So it actually worked out perfectly for me. And there were a lot of other American expats in that group as well that were either local hires like myself or more commonly just people that would come on secondment for a couple of years. So I've been really fortunate in my roles that I've never really needed to know the German language for work. And have gotten by mostly with just English. And it actually worked out really well being able to rejoin PwC. I ended up then going on secondment with the German firm to Dubai for 2 years. I spent a couple of years living in Dubai, but have been back in Germany now since 2018 and have been working for myself for the past 2.5 years.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. So when you initially moved to Germany, were you sponsored by your employer? Like, did they give you like the whole package, like move abroad, we'll pay you to move here? Like
exactly.
We've heard
yeah, so
okay,
they
nice.
sponsored me. I can't remember at the time like what I got in terms of relocation. I think they paid for like a couple months in a furnished apartment and helped me to get a realtor to find a place, and then like paid for some furniture or whatever. But it's actually funny that because I've changed jobs so many times within Germany and then gone on to come into Dubai and come back and then had to get a different type of visa and then finally get permanent residency, which was just about the same time that I decided I wanted to work for myself, which was what allowed me to do that. I think I've been through like the immigration process 7 or 8 different times.
Oh, so, what a nightmare. Yeah, I don't know if Frankfurt was as bad as Berlin, but when I was going through the immigration process in Berlin, it was the biggest shit show ever. I don't know. I struggled a lot with the immigration process there.
The struggle is that it's not very digital, so everything is like still papers. And now I'm in the process of trying to get citizenship. So I got one of the first appointments, which ironically was on July 4th in Frankfurt to like hand in all of my paperwork, but then I got a letter back saying it could be 14 months before it goes further because there's so many people that have applied now under these dual citizenship laws.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about like it's taking around 2 years or something like that even to get a response. And I know there are some people taking it to court. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't know too in depth, but some people are actually like taking the German government to court because it's been taking so long. But that's what happens when there's big legislation changes and stuff like this, right? Like there was like a floodgate open, Germany finally allowing dual citizenship. For those who don't know out there, previously you couldn't have dual citizenship in Germany and they just changed that. So yeah, that's really sweet that you qualify. And how was living in Dubai? Like what did you think about like the transition between those two places? Because I know, for example, like the tax rates in Germany are crazy high, but it's the complete opposite in Dubai, no income tax.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, being a U.S. person, I'm always exposed to income tax, but at least I had the FEIE to rely on, and I wasn't making as much money at the time, so that was basically like paying no tax. But from a personal perspective, I really enjoyed it. So, I mean, growing up in Rhode Island, I was always on the water. My parents had a sailboat. And so being landlocked in Frankfurt was really a struggle for me. So it was really nice to go to Dubai and kind of be by the beach and be able to be around the water and just kind of be in that environment. I think even though I had already been through a couple of different immigration processes in Germany, you know, initially moving and then changing jobs, that was still very frustrating. Like I can remember viscerally sitting at my desk in Frankfurt, like trying to get the right paperwork and stuff in place that I needed for my visa and just needing a glass of wine so badly to like get me through that conversation.
A bottle of whiskey in like the drawer.
Yeah, but I think after having gone through that, and as much as there's some issues sometimes with the German bureaucracy and getting things pushed through the government, I think Dubai has its own set of issues because it grew so fast that there's just not a lot of systems that have caught up with it. So I think kind of after going through that and, you know, having it at the end of the day obviously work out and I was able to move there just gave me a lot more faith that just not even related to just immigration, but just anything going on in my life, especially like setting up a business, that like, okay, you know, be patient, things are going to work out, like you don't need to get stressed about things you can't control. So I think those types of experiences are very humbling and you learn a lot in that respect.
So I've only done smaller moves. Like I initially moved to Munich and then at Berlin and then to Vienna after that. But what was it like Frankfurt to Dubai, that's a big move. So how did you go about that? Like putting your stuff in storage or like physically making the move? Like, I guess, yeah. Any suggestions for people out there who are going through like bigger transitions like that?
Yeah, I didn't really have that much. It was also interesting for me personally because the reason I moved to Dubai, I was with a German, but he had moved to Hong Kong for work. And so we were doing long distance between Frankfurt and Hong Kong for a while. And then we decided to move together somewhere and we just decided to move to Dubai. So he requested a transfer, I requested a secondment. And actually before he had moved to Hong Kong, he had sold me all of his old furniture. So I just had like leftover things that I wasn't really attached to. So I just sold all of my stuff in Germany and then we got like a stipend once we got to Dubai to like put all the furniture and stuff in place. And because it was like 2 incomes as well, that helped a lot because Dubai is very expensive, so we were able to get like a nice apartment that had a marina view and you could look out on the boats and everything, so that worked out quite well.
Nice. That's interesting, slowly chasing each other around the world.
Yeah, we're not together anymore. But
at least it was an adventure, right?
Yes, it was.
So you mentioned when you moved to Frankfurt originally, you didn't speak any German. I was in the exact same boat. I decided to take Spanish in school, never knowing I would end up in Germany, and now it's kind of useless to me when living in a German-speaking country. So how did you go, I guess, about kind of integrating, building a social circle? Where did you find friends, basically?
Yeah, it's been really hard. I mean, when I first moved over, I was like a little bit lazy about the learning German because I didn't need it for work. So I was like taking kind of classes here and there, but never really focused on like improving that much aside from like being able to order at restaurants and things like that. But then being with a German for a while and his parents didn't speak a lot of English, that definitely helped. Like I would go visit his parents and have to speak with them in German. And then actually I learned most of my German formally when I was living in Dubai because I wasn't traveling as much for work, and so I actually had time to take like in-person classes, and that really allowed me to better understand, like get a couple of steps up. I think I ended up taking the B1 exam in Dubai that I would need eventually to get my permanent residency. So that allowed me to like better understand the grammar and all of that, which I think once you get to then like a certain level of understanding, it's easier to kind of start learning it yourself because you can absorb things and understand them around you. So that definitely
I know for
helped.
me, like one of the biggest things like when I was learning German is really like changing the way your brain like processes information, because like I noticed what was really holding me back at the beginning is like automatically thinking everything in English converting to German. It just like slowed the process a lot for me. So changing the way of thinking, but I guess that's a bit easier said than done.
Yeah.
So.
And then actually after I left PwC, when I came back to Frankfurt, I ended up going into private equity for 3 years, and I was working for a Toronto-based company who had just started to build up a team in Germany, and they brought me in as their first European finance person. So I was sitting in an office in Frankfurt with like 4 other German speakers, and that also helped me. I mean, I was kind of lazy and they would speak English to me, but when we were dealing with like the German property managers and bookkeepers, like I would sometimes have to get in arguments with them about stuff in German. So that also helped kind of force me into it, but then I hired people underneath me that were native German speakers and got away from it a little bit. But what's even still helpful for me, like I've got a big client right now in Austria, and I can obviously read German a lot better than I can speak it. So like I can read through their lease agreements and things like that. Like I had these weird gaps in my knowledge that my landlord comes over and I don't know how to explain all the things about like my pipes to him, but I can like read, legal agreements and lease agreements in German. So it's just because I picked it up from so many random places. And I'm still in the process. That's kind of like one of my New Year's resolutions is to get better about like sitting down and still practicing it every day, like on my iPad, for example. And even, right now I'm trying to watch less TV, but I've kind of made a loophole for myself that I'm just rewatching Suits right now, but I'm watching it in German. So like that's okay, learning.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I've done the same thing, like rewatching old TV shows or old movies. Like movies are hard for me because I don't know, I'm just like watching something in its original version, especially a movie, is just so much better in my opinion. But I've done the same thing with TV shows, like rewatching them in another language.
Yeah,
and
I don't think I answered your question about the friends aspect of it, because that's something that I found very challenging. So at first, when I first moved to Germany, I was 25 years old, and so I was a lot more interested than I am maybe now in my mid to late 30s of like just going out and going to bars, and it seemed like that was very like the expat community was kind of concentrated on that. They had all these different groups of like going out for Friday night drinks or whatever. So I would do that quite a bit at first and found like a couple of groups of like girlfriends and things from that, but the struggle was that the longer I stayed as an expat, it was like those people kept turning over because they were only staying a couple of years. And so that got very frustrating. And even, when I initially moved back to Germany from Dubai, I was kind of going out and doing those things again, all these different like international girl groups or whatever. But it was just really hard to find people to like click with immediately that I felt like I could have a deeper connection with. And so that's been a real struggle of like, trying to find other people that are expats because you think you're going to have more in common with them, but then they're not necessarily like staying put, and then it's very hard to kind of tap into German friend circles. So I have my best friend here in Frankfurt right now. I actually met her on LinkedIn, funny enough. I was trying to get some work from her. And she's German, but she spent a long time in the US, so I think that's why she's like more open to international friendships, and her boyfriend's also American, so that has kind of worked out. But yeah, it's been, I mean, luckily I'm not the type of person that needs like a ton of friends, and building a business, I've been quite busy anyway, so I really only will invest in people that like I want to keep the connection with and not just go off and do these like high level, I don't know, but that's how you meet new people, so maybe I'm not looking at it the right way.
No, yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Something I've also experienced the same thing, like attempting to make new friend groups here, and then it's kind of like a rotating door. Like people don't tend to stay so long in those communities. So yeah, I guess kind of, we've talked about this before on the show, but like what's worked for me is like either like Facebook groups or like meetups and stuff. But yeah, building long-term relationships is definitely a struggle.
Yeah.
There's no like magic answer as to how to make it better. It's just struggling through it sometimes. Like, I don't know. That's a lot of being an expat. It's just kind of struggling through some things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess looking back, is there anything either on your first move or the move from Dubai or anything like that, any advice you wish you had to make the process smoother?
I think just the patience thing is a big one. Just, you know, sometimes these things take a lot of time, and it's going to be frustrating to like get all the paperwork together and kind of understand what the steps are. And it definitely helps when you're getting help through that process. But I think it's just a matter of kind of sitting back and realizing that things are somehow going to work out. And even if it was to like get delayed by a month or something, it's not necessarily like the end of the world, obviously. And also, like, I've been fortunate enough where I've actually put pressure sometimes on my employers to be like, I need help with this process. And I think that's important, because if you can get the help, a lot of times when you're paying those, I don't know what they're even called, like immigration people, to like get you the appointments at the foreign office, that goes a long way, because they have like the in and they can get you a quicker appointment. Plus, it was a real issue for me coming back from to Frankfurt from Dubai was 2018, and it was around the time where they had, you know, been letting a lot of people into Germany for a couple of years. And I had been reading all these blog posts that there were so many people that were trying to go through the process themselves to get visas, that they would line up at the immigration office like overnight in order to like be in line to get an appointment. And I'm like, I'm not, as a single woman in her 30s, going to go to some sketchy area of the city and wait around in the middle of the night. So like, you need to pay for somebody to do this for me. So
that's why I said it was such a shit show. Like when I first moved to Berlin, I moved immediately after graduating. So I was in a bit of I kind of just like packed my bags and said, let's go. Like no job, no plan, just kind of went there. And yeah, it was like a legitimate thing, going at 1 or 2 a.m., standing outside the, like in a giant line in Berlin. And I had like a bit of an experience one time with like this guy who like threatened me, and we had to call the police. Anyways, it was a whole thing. But yes, the process can be scary.
Yeah.
So if you're like fortunate enough,
just pay somebody to take care of it for you. And even when I was when I'm going through the process now to get my citizenship, I decided to pay an immigration attorney to go through the process for me, even though I could have figured out the forms and stuff myself. I just figured having that person kind of grease the skids, so to speak, is helpful. And I think that's why I was able to get one of the first appointments, because they changed the law like the last day of June, and like I said, I got in on July 4th, so it was pretty quick. But now
that's a really huge piece of advice. Like if you're in the situation where you can hire an immigration attorney, definitely do it. Mm-hmm. It'll make your life so much easier, make the process smoother, and make sure you actually have like all of your documents in place. So I've not had that luck, but maybe on my next move.
There you go.
All right. I guess kind of as my final question, if anyone else was like looking to take the leap and move abroad, what advice would you give them?
Just do it. I mean, just try it out for a year. That was kind of my thinking initially. Like, I don't know if I'm going to like this at all. Am I going to get homesick? So I just tried to bite things off in as small of pieces. It's almost like taking things one day at a time, but I had kind of committed to a year, basically. And just see how it goes. And there's always the option to reassess and change your situation, whether that means that you can't do it right now, but you want to do it in the future, or you decide to move and then you don't like it and you move back. These things are flexible. Like, where you live is not as, I don't know, set in stone as some people think that it is. And even, you know, I've been here for 12 years, but only the past 3 have I actually started to feel like, okay, this is sustainable for me in terms of my lifestyle to be an expat. Previous to that, it was like every couple of years I would have these ups and downs, kind of like an existential crisis. Like, do I want to move home and be closer to my family? Or do I want to stay out here because I can travel and be in, like, I don't know, 12 different countries within a 2-hour flight in Frankfurt? And it's funny because, you know, you mentioned at the beginning, the work that I do professionally is in the cross-border accounting advisory space. But for me, like, working in that cross-border space professionally is not just professional, it's also personal, because that's how I want to actually live my life, is to go back and forth between the two countries. And so that's why I say the last 3 years, it's finally been sustainable for me to see, like, kind of the long-term expat path. And so if you do try it out for a year, you don't know where your life is going to take you. You could craft your whole entire life around the fact that you're an expat. It's just a really interesting, I don't know, way to kind of figure out who you are and kind of what you want to be and who you want to do. I never would be doing the work that I'm doing professionally if I hadn't made that move.
Nice. Really good advice. Take the leap. Don't be scared, or do be a little scared, but it'll work out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. In the show notes, I'll make sure to link your LinkedIn, but if people wanted to get in touch with you, is there anywhere else they should reach out? Or LinkedIn's the way to go?
I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest, yeah.
Okay, sweet. I'll make sure to link it below, and thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes packed with insights and stories to empower your global financial journey. This is Passport to Wealth, where your financial future knows no borders.
The information provided in this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered professional, financial, or tax advice.
We strongly recommend consulting with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, or other appropriate expert before making any financial decisions or taking action based on the content discussed in this episode.
Your personal financial situation is unique, and a professional can provide tailored advice to meet your specific needs.